Good afternoon. We're just going to begin here in a moment. Just waiting for councillors to come take their seat, please.
Thank you, Chair. We are now live.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We had a pretty incredible event this afternoon with Mayor Savage. It was quite moving. I'm not sure about other councillors, but certainly I had a few tears. What an incredible mayor. So I will call this meeting to order. And I would like to share the land acknowledgement. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Thank you for being here with us today. Can I have an approval of the minutes from March 28th, 2024, please? Moved by Councillor Cleary, seconded by Councillor Cuttle. No amendments to those minutes. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed? Those minutes have passed. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Clerk, what have we got for additions or deletions today, if any?
Thank you, Chair. We have received no requests through the clerk's office for additions or deletions as of
Thank you, Simon. We have nothing. Anything from council, please? Oh, Councillor Purdy.
I would like to bring forward information, item number 2, to the next Transportation Standing Committee meeting. And can I have confirmation on the date of that? Do we have that new date?
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. So we will bring forward the memorandum from the Chief Administrative Officer dated March 12th, 2024 regarding the traffic islands on Colby Drive for a next meeting. At this time, I don't know that we have moved that meeting, but I believe that we will have that discussion at agenda setting.
Okay, perfect.
Okay?
Perfect, yep.
We may need to move that to the following week. Correct. Okay. Thank you so much. Any other changes for the order of business today? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the amended order of business? Thank you, Councillor Cuttle. A seconder. Councillor Mason, thank you so much. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion has carried. We have order of business today. Business arising out of the minutes, there are none. So I'll have a call for declaration of conflict of interest if there are any today. Seeing none, moving on to motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration of deferred business, and notices of tabled matters. They really are real things, but we have none today. Correspondence 10.1. Simon, what have you got for us?
Thank you, Chair. The clerk's office has received correspondence for item 13.1.2, about 8 items, I believe. Those have been circulated to members of the Standing Committee.
Thank you. 10.2 petitions. Councillors, any petitions today? Seeing none, we will move on to 10.3. There are no presentations today. So that brings us to public participation. We do not have any registered speakers today, so I will ask if anyone in the audience would like to speak. And I would ask that you speak for 5 minutes and keep your comments respectful, on topic, directed to the chair, and the clerk Elizabeth here will hold up a yellow sign when you have 30 seconds remaining, and when your time is up, she will hold up the red sign. Anyone here would like to speak? Is there anyone in the gallery? Oh, sir, yes, come forward, please. Thank you. There is a little button that you'll need to press.
That one, okay.
Thank you. And if you could just state your name for us, please, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
My name is Peter Zimmer, longtime resident of Halifax. I'm on the board of the Halifax Cycling Coalition and the Cycling Coalition's representative to the External Stakeholders Road Safety Committee. I know a number of my colleagues on that same stakeholders committee have been in correspondence. I've been out of town, didn't have a chance to get that in. I want to register my objection to considering the main item on the business, the regional road safety strategy today. I would ask that it be put off for a month. We have just received the information within the last 4 or 5 days. It's a fairly fat package, and there are a number of things present in there that I have problems with. There are a number of issues that are overlooked. One of those being the specific feedback at our last stakeholders meeting that we considered it unanimously inappropriate to say we're going to make the metric deaths per 100,000 of population over the next, 15 years? That's an extremely modest objective, and it will be further impaired by the growth of our population, which is projected. We think any target should be firmly based in total deaths and total number of injuries. At that, I will terminate my input to this and leave it up to you to decide whether you are going to consider this matter when it comes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Your comments have been noted. I appreciate that. I will continue to ask if there are any other speakers. I see one coming up. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you, Matt. You know the drill.
I do. Yes, hello. My name is Matt Stickland, resident of District 2, and I'm speaking to you today in my capacity as the City Hall reporter for the Coast. I wasn't going to speak today, but Mr. Zimmer brought up a point that I think is very important, and to be honest, I think it is a fundamental failing of good governance of this council. The fact that we are basing our injury success or our road safety success on the amount of per capita injuries, I think is irresponsible for 2 reasons. The first is that road deaths and injuries are largely preventable. The fact that we are thinking about adopting a success framework where we can have an increase in absolute numbers of injuries and deaths if our population grows fast enough to make the trend go down, I think is extremely irresponsible. On top of that, that injury metric is based only on police reports. It is an underreported statistic. I have been looking into this, and I found a couple of collisions where people have been injured, and those injuries are not captured in HRM's reporting data because we get it from police reports. And I don't want to say that there is no value in having a standard set of data, but if we are going to be judging, if our safety metric is going to be based on per capita, we are allowing an increase of preventable violence on taxpayer-funded infrastructure. And I do not believe for 1 second that there is anyone in this room or anyone who works for the city who is thinking to themselves, oh, you want to know what? Today is the day where I think people should die on our infrastructure. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants people to be dying on our streets. It is preventable. We are choosing not to do it. In the report that you're going to read, staff are going to tell you that it is hard and it is expensive. Both of those things are true. They are very true. We have spent 70 years building car-first transportation infrastructure. This is not going to change overnight. People's behaviors, people don't want this change. People are going to fight it. You know this better than anyone. It is going to be expensive. It was going to be expensive in 2018. It's more expensive today. It's going to be more expensive in the future. The cost of these changes being expensive should not and cannot be a reason this doesn't happen. It is never going to get cheaper to do this. Never. And the longer we go without trying to change things, the more people that come here, the more people that drive, the harder it is going to be to achieve the cultural shift that we want to achieve according to Halifax. It is irresponsible, and I would dare say a failure of good governance, should the per capita metric be used as our safety standard. It is allowing for an increase of road violence, preventable road violence that is taxpayer funded, as long as our population keeps growing. And I would remind you that on Tuesday, you guys gave first reading to a draft of legislation that is probably going to increase or allow for an increase of our population in hundreds of thousands. And at what point has Halifax stopped growing in the recent history? Like everyone, even though we're trying to cut back on immigration, everyone knows that like globally, Canada is the place to go. Our immigration is not going to stop overnight just because we don't want it to, like, because we're like, oh, we're turning off the taps now. Like, that's not how it works. So I really would suggest that you would consider Mr. Zimmer's request. I would suggest that you send this back to staff and you say, hey, in 2018, we had a standard with 20% reduction in absolute terms. We didn't achieve that. Why not? How can we do that? And then staff will come back and say, here are the expensive and hard ways in which it is possible. At which point you can say, no thanks, per capita, and then we can judge you at the ballot box. Right now, you are being presented an option, like in 2018, we passed a standard that said absolute, and then now we can't meet it. And instead of saying, oh, hey, why can't we meet it? Maybe we should change. We're saying, hey, why don't we just lower our safety standards instead? That just fundamentally feels irresponsible, and part of my job is holding power to account, and it honestly doesn't feel like reporting is doing enough anymore. So at least now this is on the public record. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you coming forward today. I will ask for a third time, are there any speakers in the gallery who would like to address Transportation Committee? Seeing none, I will move on to our information item number 12. No items brought forward. Moving on to 13 staff reports. 13.1.1 Halifax Transit 2023-24 Q3 KPI report. And I believe we have Mark Santilli to come forward today. Thank you so much. Welcome. Great to see you, Mark.
Thank you very much. All right. I'm not sure. All right. Through the chair to the committee, my name is Mark Santilli. I'm the manager of technical services for Halifax Transit, and I am here to present our third quarter KPIs. So first off, a reminder that Q3 includes October, November, and December of 2023. The KPIs mentioned in the subsequent slides include data that was subject to service reductions that were implemented back in February 2023. Some of those service reductions were partly reinstated in November 20th, but please keep that in mind that we weren't operating at full service. Also, there were 4 significant routing changes that were introduced in November 2023 as part of the Moving Forward Together plan. First up, we have our fare revenue by type. Halifax Transit's new mobile fare payment app launched in November of 2023. You'll see starting in November 2023 of the graph there, the purple bars indicate the revenue collected through HFX Go. In February, that number represented 20% of all revenue collected. We weren't able to include it in the slide, but March's numbers are even more of an improvement. I believe we're at 24% of all revenue was collected through HFX Go. So I'm glad to see that those numbers are increasing and the public is adopting the new app. You'll also see an increase in our non-discretionary programs. Those are programs such as the Affordable Access Program, UPass, ePass, other programs like that. And as a result of HFX Go, the paper products sold and the cash fares collected have decreased each month. Our next slide shows a further breakdown of the fare products and the collection methods of those fare products. Again, 20% of fare revenue collected in February 2024 was through HFX Go, through the app. And 30% of our total monthly passes were purchased using HFX Go. One other thing I wanted to mention here, you'll notice the one-day pass and the two-day pass in HFX Go are minuscule numbers. We did expect that. Those two fare products were created in HFX Go with tourism in mind, so we anticipate in the summer months that the numbers for those products will likely increase. Next up, we have our boardings and revenue for Q3. In Q3, boardings were up 15%, and Q3 revenue was up 14% year over year. The reason for the discrepancy there, the difference there, is first of all, the changes implemented as part of the Moving Forward Together plan includes a more transfer-based approach. So the boardings represent the increase in transfers, and the slightly less revenue represents the increase in usage of programs that I mentioned, such as the Affordable Access Program, the DCS Pass, the ePass, things like that, and less so of our paper products. Our reported overload incidents by quarter. Passenger overloads have remained high through Q3. However, on a month-by-month basis, they are trending downward. So we are hoping to see those continue to trend downward. Next, our on-time performance. Our on-time performance has dropped as traffic and ridership increases. Schedule adjustments were made in November to address some of the challenges, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, we have noticed that the on-time performance has been trending upwards in recent months. I think the worst, I don't have the specific figures here, but the worst of it was around the September-October timeframe, and the on-time performance has been improving each month. I think January was 75% or so. So they are trending in a better direction now. In terms of Accessibus, Accessibus provided 3% more trips in Q3 compared to the previous year. And for our bus maintenance costs for Q3 were 16% below the budgeted cost. In terms of kilometers between collisions, in the third quarter, a collision involving transit vehicles occurred once every 34,900 kilometers driven, and a preventable collision occurred every 18,700 kilometers driven. In terms of our recruitment and retention, conventional bus operator numbers have continued trending positively in early 2024. And with our only kind of negative month being December, and that is likely due to us not having a new hire class in December. So every month other than the month of December, we have been increasing our workforce, alleviating the challenges that those service reductions we had implemented back in February making the situation a little better for all of us. That is the end of the presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Councillor Cleary, you're up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this. Really appreciate it. Couple of quick questions. When you look at the growth in the various forms, ferry, conventional, Accessibus, Accessibus, I say only because it still grew by quite a bit, 5%, but relative to the others, which grew by 11 and 15, it seems kind of small, seeing how we're sort of getting back to. Is that because a lot of the growth had already happened previously? Is demand sort of, slowing in terms of its growth? Or is it increasing? Because I hear from people regularly who, just in the last couple of months, indicating that they're having a hard time either booking frequent trips or the time, because we were trying to get to almost like a taxi-like service, but obviously we're nowhere near that yet. Are we actually just at capacity? Do we have the capacity to grow by another 5, 10, 15% like the other forms? Or, can you just sort out what the factor is for the, again, good growth, 5%, but relative to the others, smaller?
You're calling a friend?
Phil Harrott, Director of Transit Operations, Halifax Transit. Through the chair to the councillor, yes, we are looking at numbers and stuff now, and our capacity to take on more ridership in Accessibus is challenged. We continue to see growth and continue to see increased trips. That's due to work that's happening to create greater efficiency within that service, but we are coming to the point that our capacity, both vehicle and operator-wise, is reaching a limit.
That's what I figured. The other one was on the collisions involving transit vehicles. It's hard to tell. It seems to be increasing because the mileage is shrinking for the number of kilometers we drive between collisions involving transit vehicles, but doesn't actually include numbers, like how many collisions, and of course it's been newsworthy recently with a number of incidents, especially with pedestrians, unfortunately. So what can we glean from that, or what additional data can you give us around collisions involving transit vehicles? And if any other ancillary things that go along with this, whether it's driver training, those kind of things that we could do additionally, either pre getting behind the wheel or after they've had a collision, what happens?
Through the chair, I'm Victoria Pierce-Goodland, Director of Employee Support and Development, and one of the groups that report to me are our accident claims folks, so the folks who are reviewing post-collision. So a few things. One, the number of collisions, we look at collisions based on preventability, so not whether the operator was at fault for the collision, but whether the collision could have been prevented by the operator in some way. And the number of preventable collisions is decreasing, actually. So while we are seeing more collisions, that's, I think, a reflection of more traffic on the roads, which also impacts things like service, obviously. When an operator does have a preventable collision, it is reviewed for both preventability and also training opportunities, and if required, an operator would get refresher training.
And so you say the preventable ones are decreasing, but when I look at, so it's hard to tell. So if you look at the chart that says kilometers between collisions, it's shrunk, so that means you're driving less, having more collisions. So I'm just, help me understand how you say it's decreasing when the number of kilometers is decreasing. Because you would think if you were having fewer of them, the number of kilometers would be increasing between those collisions.
Sorry? Yeah, so the number of preventable, like if you look at the number of preventable collisions as like a percentage of the total collisions, that's what's decreasing.
Okay, so you're having more of them, but fewer of them are preventable.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
and
sure that gives me more confidence or not. And I see drivers doing stupid things, passing a bus when they clearly have a signal indicator coming out from a bus stop or a bay, and so on. And I don't know, and obviously given privacy and HR issues, you probably can't tell us a whole lot more, but can you provide confidence to us when you see this data that our drivers are doing better at safer driving or worse at safer driving?
Driving and continually working to complete sort of that feedback loop. So when a collision occurs and it's reviewed, what we learn from that collision, how the collision happened, what could have been done to prevent it, gets fed back both to the operator, but also our training group. So then it becomes part of both our continuous and then new hire training for bus operators to continue improving the skills of our operators.
Okay, I've run out of time, but thank you, I appreciate that, and I may come back.
Thank you, Victoria. We're going to move on to Councillor Hensby. You're up next, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I just want to ask a quick question on the collisions. I'd like, as Councillor Cleary asked, I'd like to see a number instead of just this per kilometer ratio. I'd like to know the amount of collisions that have been, but also what type of collision. Are they with another vehicle, with a pedestrian, or with a roadside structure, like a power pole or a fire hydrant or a park bench, whatever? I'd just like to know what type of collisions it were, just for statistical purposes. So, or if any of that data may be available, it'd be great.
Through the chair, that information, I don't have it with me right now, but we track that and it certainly can be made available both on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Thank you.
We track both the preventability of a collision, but also where the collision happens in the city and the type of collision, whether it's, to your point, whether it's with a pedestrian, if it's, a right-hand turn into a fire hydrant, or like whatever the case may be.
Thank you.
You're good, Councillor? Okay. Sounds like we just, Councillor Hensby would like to have more information, and that's what I'm hearing from Councillor Cleary as well. So thank you. Moving on to Councillor Cuddle. You're next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, so these reports are, they're great to a point. And then there's kind of the, if you really want to get into it, you do need more data to fully understand what's happening. So I just have a few questions here. One is about the breakdown, like presenting the breakdown of peak between AM and PM. When you look at certain routes, when it all gets mixed together, I look at, say, 9A, 9B, or any route from Spryfield that's heading to Mumford. It's helpful for me to know if the issue is happening in the morning down the Herring Cove Road, or in the afternoon down Chebucto Road, or if in fact both of those, those roadways are congested and causing the issue. Because I think we have to start looking at some solutions to addressing those issues. I look at, the peak hours. They're amongst the worst of the lot, the routes that go down Herring Cove Road and Chebucto Road. And during peak, they're even worse, like 9A, 9B, like at peak hour hitting 56% on time, which is really quite low. So providing some more data, I did have a meeting about this with Transit, with Patricia. We're going to look at getting those numbers, so I'm just hoping someone can get me those numbers, or maybe even start to include them in the reports, so we can identify the chronic problems. The same goes with overload. Overloads are overall trending down according to the data. When I look again at specific routes like 9A, which is the Herring Cove Road route that services the main corridor in Spryfield, in Q2 there were 52 overload instances, and in Q3 we're looking at 66. So that's actually a significant increase in overloads, even though the data presented is showing things are getting better. So even color coding, if we could color code the routes on that to say, okay, overload, or something. Do something so that we can see where the chronic problems are and where things are getting worse, so we can have those conversations about what might be done to address them. If you have any information on that right now, that'd be great to hear. In terms of recruitment and retention, I'm just wondering, I mean, it's good to see that, we're on the positive side of that. And that's, given what's been going on in the last couple of years, that's always positive and good. But what does this mean in terms of reaching our overall optimal targets? Like, where are we tracking there? So we know that our retention is going up, we're recruiting more people, but what are we trying to get to, I guess is my question for that one. And are we getting closer? Or is it a moving target? If you could just provide a little bit more insight into that, please.
Phil, I think there's a couple of questions in there for you.
Phil Herrick, Director of Transit Operations, Halifax Transit, through the chair to the councillor. I think in regards to the staffing levels and conversations, I think we have a target number we're looking for to provide that service, but there are multiple pieces that are coming in, that are impacting and affecting how that's happening. Internally, we're having a lot of movement within there where folks may be leaving the role as an operator to move from conventional transit to Accessibus. The challenges in staffing folks there are across the board. So those moves happen internally. We have some folks moving from the conventional operator pool to the ferry pool to address some positions that are there. And we've also increased and had retirements and folks leaving the organization for other things where we're filling in service supervisors. So that piece is a little bit of a moving target as we work through it. And as we continue to try to really come to that understanding of service reliability and what we're looking at and revamping how we're recruiting and where we're recruiting from, we're seeing a lot of differences where we have to make. I don't think we can measure the exact same way we've always measured, and we have to look at what that workforce is looking for as we're going forward. When I started as a transit operator a very long time ago, because I'm older than I want to admit, we came in and we were all happy to work 50 and 60 and 70 hours a week sometimes, and the workforce is just not there anymore. So we're working through how we recruit and we retain, folks that provides a good, work-life balance and really want to draw in, that workforce. So I think, from the operations perspective, I would say that that's a little more, fluid than it has been in the past. But the recruiting team and the training team, are working very diligently and constantly making sure folks that are coming into the job understand what the job really is and the fact that we run that peak hour service and it's not straight through and making sure that candidates and applicants really understand that also creates a little bit of a challenge. So again, they're working diligently on delivering that. When it comes to the overloads and some of the things you were speaking to in regards to adherence, as you discussed, we met there a little while ago and we're actually working on that. We've revamped how we're looking at some of that data, much like we did with the security data, to start to pull that together so we can really look at peak AM versus PM, where it's happening, and some of those mitigation strategies to look at how to better both of those things. Through the recently passed budget this week, part of that was providing service hours to operations to put resources in place to start looking at both of those things. That's an interim solution as we continue to work with our partners in traffic services to understand where the trending is across the city, and with our peers in both city planning and transit planning to make sure we're finding the most efficient routes and being able to adjust that. We've been pretty static in how we've approached it up until now. These service hours and those additional resources will give us a little more flexibility on how we're doing those things day to day. A little bit of a
And
around the
hopefully
circle
connecting
for you,
with
but-
Public Works as well. You mentioned planning, but Public Works I think, has a role to play in this as well.
Well, yeah, I believe traffic services is in
Traffic
public
okay.
Yeah,
works. so-
traffic services.
Yes.
Thank you, Phil. We're going to move on to Councillor Purdy. Councillor Outhat, I did see you on the board, but you're off now, so, okay, just want to make sure. You got scooped. Get back on the board then. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this. So I also was more curious about the collision data as well. Like, do we know how many collisions, like a number, and preventable collisions that happened in the third quarter? And I guess the comparison with the year before. What would you attribute the significantly higher service requests for this quarter? I think it's 45% higher than last year. I'm also curious, I believe the last KPI, we talked a lot about safety and incidents happening on transit, and I didn't see that information in this one, so I'm wondering where we're at with that safety incidents, violent incidents. How is that trending during this quarter? And where is that shown on this data? Would that be other feedback? Bus stops and shelters. I also received some complaints about the state of bus shelters and garbage perhaps not being picked up as often as it should. And like, just wondering, is that a transit thing, or is that under a different department, TPW, in HRM? Like, where does that fall? And also a question about the ferry. We've been hearing in the news that the ferry has been impacted by, I guess, a shortage of staff. And how is that, how are we doing with that, I guess, is that question. And I think that's it for right now. Thank you.
Through the chair to the councillor, so certainly we have the number of collisions, comparisons to prior quarters, prior years. If there's a desire to have that information, either just on a one-off or in KPIs, it absolutely can be included, for sure. We can connect about what you'd like to see. And I think that's similar to what Councillor Hensby is asking about as well.
Yeah.
So we can figure out what exactly you guys are looking for and have it included. Not a problem.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
I'll respond in regards to your questions around the safety and security pieces. Most of our safety and security initiatives were put in place in the fourth quarter of last year. So you'll actually see some data around that in the next quarterly report, which will be the fourth quarter of last year. You know, I can say anecdotally, you know, we are seeing basically kind of what was predicted in the sense at the Bridge Terminal and Lacewood Terminal specifically, we are seeing an increase in incident, but a decrease in severity as we are having staff there. So there is more being reported, but having staff there, you know, when we've had feedback from operators, we've had feedback from the public at those locations that they do feel safer, they do feel encouraged to see staff there, uniform staff present and being able to help with the safety concerns, but also help with the public information and customer service part of things. Kind of across the board, you know, we were recently got to see something positive in social media where someone had taken a picture of one of our supervisors actually cleaning up garbage at the Lacewood Terminal and posting that. So we always love to see the positive feedback and the good things that come out of that. I think those are, you know, a large part of what's happening with safety and security. Again, with the budget that was just passed, Council approved, TSE and Council approved last year for the creation of a safety program with transit. The positions to actually start working on that program were in this year's budget. So with budget approved, we'll now go out and start recruiting for those positions that we'll start to recruit. We've continued conversations nationally with CUTA, the Canadian Urban Transit Association, which is hosting a conference here in a week or so. I'm sitting on the CUTA Security and Safety Committee. So we're looking at our partners in Vancouver and in Winnipeg that have recently put on the road safety programs to help develop ours in a quick and timely manner. Okay. Moving on to ferry, we had 3 open positions in ferry that were causing some of the challenges we have under Transport Canada with the ferry. We actually have to have a certain number of staff that are a certain classification to operate the ferry and carry passengers. So when we are missing someone or missing a staff member, it does provide challenges, but we're in the process of offers with those positions now. and working on a plan even outside of the Mill Cove piece on looking at staffing for the ferry service to help reduce those impacts in the future.
Okay. Is there like a ETA on that?
No,
Okay.
we're starting to work on that in the last week or so.
Okay.
But again, we're working with our partners in the Amalgamated Transit Union and seeing what we can do to action that as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Thank you, Phil. That's good work. And Canadian Urban Transit Association is going to be here May 5th to 7th, so I look forward to seeing everybody.
Patricia.
I didn't see your light on, Patricia. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. Patricia Hughes, Director of Planning, Customer Engagement. I think there were a few questions in there I can quickly answer. The customer service calls were up 45%. On the chart on the next page, you can kind of see the categories. One of the big increases was transit technology, and that's because we launched the app during that period. So there's a lot of calls on that.
Yeah, of course.
The other one is planning and scheduling, which
Yeah.
historically we've characterized more as, can I have a new bus route in my neighborhood? This time, those are up because it is the questions about overloads and lateness were grouped in that category. So those were the two main categories where they went up.
Okay.
Shelters, we have a contract for shelters, so the regular cleaning is done by a vendor. During the winter, it's weekly. Because of all the salt and spray and whatnot. And during the summer, the expectation is that they clean them every 2 weeks. But if we have a complaint or a request or an issue, we log that into a website and they go out to take care of it. Or if it's an urgent matter, depending on what debris may be in the shelter, they can respond more quickly. But that is done by an external vendor.
Okay. 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 Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Councillor Mason.
Hi, guys. Big summer for you, Mark, and fall with finishing rolling out Halifax Go. I'm not going to ask you any questions, especially not about timelines. We've learned our lesson, you and I, and we're never doing that again. I have 4 questions to Phil. I see in the report that loss of service and time between service calls have been generally trending down, a little bit up this quarter, but generally trending down. And then a couple of pages later, the cost per kilometer cost of maintenance is up substantially. Like, are those attributable to one another? Like, how do they interrelate? I'll just throw out all 4 questions at once so you guys can go through them. How are we looking for EV bus rollout and timing? That's more of a supply chain question than a staff capacity question, because I know that we're still, hoping to get those on time, but it's kind of out of our hands. Actually, I guess I only have 3 questions because the ferry staffing question appears to have been addressed. Last one is, did you folks have a chance to look back? We had a presentation at council or at the committee last meeting by a citizen, Min Tan, who had laboriously entered all this data and come up with some amazing visualizations and graphics. And I think some of the questions that I'd heard from councilors, especially Councillor Cuddle, about additional information, maybe we don't have the staff capacity to do that, and maybe we don't have the money to hire him for a position we create to do what he's doing right now. But at a minimum, what he was asking is it possible for that information to be put on the open data portal so that he doesn't have to, manually transcribe stuff and whatever. But I'm wondering, so I guess the question is, did you have a look at that? Is that something that interests us? How can we facilitate either him continuing to do it or moving our reports toward that? Because I found it fascinating and very instructive. So those are my 3 questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Over to Patricia.
I'll start this time. We did watch the presentation, and I guess the whole team that's involved in the stats and data did tune in for that, and most of them had met with that resident before. And we can provide more information than we are now, so we will start doing that. And I guess maybe to go back to what Councillor Cuddle had said previously, we can also start providing the peak breakouts in these reports and and more information on the overload, so we will start doing that. So definitely always interested in improving what we can supply to folks and what we can present to everyone to make it understandable. So happy to have watched that last month. On the electric vehicle rollout, we do have the pilot out testing right now. We don't have a firm date. We want to test, analyze, test. And so the buses will all be rolling in like over this calendar year, but no firm date when you may actually board one as a passenger just yet. And I think the last question's for someone else. What was it?
it's on the loss of service piece.
I think there's, sorry, through the counselor, or sort of through the chair to the counselor. So there was a question in there about maintenance and the cost per breakdown. That I cannot answer. Our director of fleet is not here today. He's presenting at a hydrogen conference. And the loss of service, we're working closely with fleet to look at the numbers and see where those things are, and really, like I mentioned earlier, working on revamping that data and how we're capturing that data. So I don't think I can answer that question just yet, but I feel our maintenance team does a good job keeping the buses running, and a lot of the loss of service stuff we're seeing right now is trending more towards traffic incidents themselves, and some of those breakdowns. So as opposed to running the service continually late, we're taking out certain trips and pieces that doesn't set that block or route late for hours at a time. But now that we have a better handle on the security data within operations, that's our focus right now, with some of that operational data. So hopefully over the next few months, our operational BA is head down and really crunching numbers and getting a good understanding from a foundational level where that's happening at. And I think that touches to some of the points from Councillor Cuttle as well, really coming back with a where and when it's happening. And again, back to the service hours that were approved in the budget, hoping to give us a little more fluidity operationally to start dealing with some of those things.
Very good, and some of the staff saw me get very excited about a hydrogen conference, so I'll just leave that there, and thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we're all excited about hydrogen. Councillor Cleary, over to you.
Thank you. Just wanted to, yes, we have some issues with overloads. Yes, we have some issues with buses, keeping them on time, keeping the ferry staffed, given the challenges for certifications and the requirements that they need for that. But there's really good news here too. Like, when you look at this, we are recruiting and retaining more drivers. Just think back where we were last year during budget. We had members of the union going, crazy because they were burnt out. They couldn't keep up. We had to cut routes because of the lack of drivers. So that's great news. Weekday boardings are finally catching up to pre-COVID levels. And, people keep forgetting this, but for the last couple of years now, weekend, Saturday, Sunday, holiday boardings have exceeded pre-COVID levels. So, we actually, we had this discussion before about we're not reaching that pre-COVID level yet, except on the weekends, actually. We're doing better on the weekends than we were in 2019 in terms of ridership. And that speaks to how COVID did change, and businesses changed, how people work, where people work, and what people use the bus for now. It's not just for commuting. Well, and some of those people could be working weekend jobs too, but a lot of people are taking the bus to go to other things in the community just besides work and school. Other good news, lots of green dots. When you look at the routes hitting our targets for ridership, lots of green dots. Yeah, some gray. Yeah, there's some, or what are they, orange and red, or yellow and red, but a lot of green ones. We're hitting our targets on a lot of our routes, which is probably why we have overloads on some of those routes. And the take up on the payment app, that growth has been tremendous. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's challenges, there's issues to fix, but there's some good work in here too that I just want to recognize. Transit staff's been doing a good job in a lot of these things, and thanks to Phil and others who looking at the safety of our transit system. We've had all kinds of issues, and just recently too around Mumford and the mall with folks and violence. So I can't wait to see us make a lot more progress in that, but that's a society-wide issue, not just a transit issue. But whatever we can do on transit, the drivers will appreciate, the passengers will appreciate, and the neighborhood will appreciate. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So just looking at our agenda today, there is a motion listed. So I'm just looking to the clerks to get an understanding of this motion. We are to accept this staff report, is that correct?
Yes, that's
staff
correct.
Presentation. Thank you so much. Councillor Cleary, you're up. Do you want to put the motion on the floor, please?
I'll put the motion on the floor. And don't we usually say forward it to council as an information item as well? No?
Not the Q.
Not the KPIs?
Qs. No.
Okay. I move that the Transportation Standing Committee accept the staff report dated April 4, 2024 and receive a presentation. Probably should have done that before we had the presentation.
Well, yes, and I wasn't expecting that we would have a motion to receive a presentation, but it is motion worthy. So thank you to the transit team, seconded by Councillor Mason. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion has carried. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? We've got Councillor Outhet. You're going to have to sit back down again. Councillor Outhet, over to you.
I wanted to mention, normally what we do in the motion here is we accept it, but we also suggest that we send it off to council, to all our colleagues.
That's what Councillor Cleary just pointed out, but
Sorry, I've got a blasting issue in my district. It's been distracting me here. Things are blowing up, literally. Yeah, exactly. So this will be sent to our colleagues at regional then, or?
no, we don't send the Q reports. We send the annual.
Why?
No, we don't send the Qs.
Oh, I don't know why we wouldn't, because they get all the same calls and questions we do, but okay.
But we send the annual, but that being
Okay.
said, thank you, and I'm sorry that things are blowing up at your desk there, Councillor. Okay, that motion has, did we vote? I think we voted, yes, that has passed. So we're going to move on to 13.1.2. Thank you to the transit team for the presentation today. Road safety strategy, the way forward, and this time around, I'm going to ask somebody to throw that on that motion on the floor, please. Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start by putting the motion on the floor that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council 1 adopt the Road Safety Strategy 2024 included in Attachment 1 and endorse the vision and goal identified, and 2, direct staff to provide annual reports to the Transportation Standing Committee regarding the actions of the road safety program and the road safety key performance indicators identified in the attached road safety strategy. All
Go
right.
ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess I'm just looking for some advice here, perhaps from our solicitor or from our clerk about...
I'm sorry. There is staff have prepared slides for the item, yes. Go ahead, Councillor Cuttle.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mason. I'm getting to that. Asking just in terms of process, whether it's the clerk or the solicitor, about how to proceed. I would like to defer the decision on this until the next meeting of Transportation Standing, whether that's the 23rd or whatever week that is. And just, to give stakeholders a chance to review it, but also for it to be reviewed by the Active Transportation Advisory Committee, which meets on May 16th. If there is a presentation, that I do see some value in having the presentation now so that we can, have that as a resource available online for people to watch and have that presentation. But I do think that we should defer it. I would make a motion to defer it for decision until the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. So deferral is always in order, and we do have staff here to offer a presentation. I do have Councillor Cleary on. Councillor Cleary, did you want to wait until after the presentation from staff? And I can't see you. Oh, there you are.
Just I'm not clear on the process.
As soon as you put a motion to defer.
So
you
the
have to
process
defer.
is you just put a motion to defer until the next meeting, but we're going to have a presentation from staff. Yep.
Wanted to make sure that we have...
Yes, we are going to receive a presentation from staff. Councillor Mason has a point of order.
So the motion to defer has to be dealt with before we have the presentation. That's what the AO says. And so what, it hasn't been seconded. So my argument would be that we don't put the deferral on until we hear from staff and discuss it. The other thing is we could only debate the deferral if the deferral is on the floor. So if we have questions for staff about the presentation, we couldn't ask them if the deferral is active on the floor. So I think that we need to take a pause. Or we have to have a vote on the deferral right now before we have the presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mason. I think, Councillor Cuttle, you are finished speaking, is that correct? No. So the process is that you have put the motion on the floor, you have requested a deferral. We have staff here to offer presentation. The deferral wasn't seconded, but now I understand that it is. So that being said, now that we have a deferral on the floor, we need to deal with that. That being said, if you want to pull your second, we can actually move forward and receive the presentation from staff, as they are here to offer that presentation. Councillor Outhead is on the line before you, Councillor Purdy. Councillor Outhead?
And hopefully this will be helpful. My suggestion is that we just let's keep this simple, have the presentation. When the presentation's through, then we have a motion to defer the debate and discussion.
That's what I'm
Yeah, that's what you're
understanding
saying.
is what
So
I'm,
let's
that's exactly
just-
what I'm saying,
Let's just
Councillor.
withdraw the motion right now, and I have to leave at 3, and I'm sorry. But just withdraw your deferral and then bring it back after the presentation, and then everybody's ticky-boo. All right.
So if we can proceed with the presentation, Councillor Purdy, you are okay? Thank you very much. Because we do have staff here, and it's beneficial to see the presentation. And then, Councillor Cuttle, if you wish to put the motion on the floor after. So, Councillor Outhet, you have to leave at 3 o'clock? Unfortunately. Okay. So, staff, you have 5 minutes.
As fast as possible for Councillor Outhet. So good afternoon. Welcome to our presentation on our new road safety strategy. We're calling it the Way Forward. So first slide, just a quick summary of our old road safety strategy and where we got to over the last 5 years. I want to give my team a lot of credit. We came from nowhere to implement a program, and we put a lot of infrastructure in the roads over those 5 years. Council made a large financial commitment, and I think we did a really excellent job of putting things out there that make our roads safer. So onto the new road safety strategy 2024. So this is our long-term guiding document. It establishes our visions, goals, and our principles. It identifies priority areas and key performance indicators. I think what you will find in comparison to the old strategy is this one's much more data-driven. It's much more focused on problem areas, and it's going to be much more capital intensive because we are looking at larger projects instead of the, spreading it out over the region. So we are trying to take a more data-driven approach to this strategy. So our strategy vision to achieve 0 fatalities and serious injuries for all road users in the HRM by 2038. I would note that the vision is an absolute number. 0 is 0. And our goal is to maintain a downward trend in the rate of fatal and serious injury collisions per 100,000 residents, as discussed as part of our external stakeholder committee. And there is no doubt there is opposition to that, and we've brought this per capita conversation to council before. We are not necessarily tied to the per capita piece. Absolute works just as fine. But we are going to translate it to per capita anyways because we need to compare it to Ottawa, for example. Like, we need to see how we're doing compared to other municipalities. And the second piece is that the per capita does allow us to show progress. We're still going to an absolute goal of 0 by 2038, but if we have 50 accidents at 100,000 people, we have 50 accidents at 600,000 people, I think it's a little disingenuous to say we haven't made progress, because I think we've made real progress. And so that is the rationale for us sticking with the per capita. And again, we did in previous iterations have this discussion at council, and I think received council support to continue with the per capita piece of it. So the guiding principles, it's Vision 0 and the Safe System approach. This is common terminology for every road safety plan across this country. Safe land use planning, safe speed, safe road users, safe vehicles, safe road design, and post-crash care. I think it's important to point out that, at some communities are now bringing a lot of this information together. So we have the IMP, we have the Halifax Transit Plan, we have the road safety strategy. So right now our strategies are isolated programs. It doesn't mean that we're not all working together on the inside, but the road safety strategy is inherently focused on the engineering improvements we can make within our roads. We aren't focused on getting people on bicycles. That is the IMP and active transportation and stuff. So we came up with a number of priority areas. intersections. So that'll be our big piece. So next month, we're coming back with the top 10, I hate that terminology, but the 10 worst intersections, I'll call it, with the most significant number of serious injuries and fatalities at them. We are looking at a 2 to 3 year plan to lay that out with a significant capital investment every year. When that program is over, we will then iterate to the next 10, and we will move through that until we get to a place where we feel like we've addressed our intersections. Our next focus area is the vulnerable road users piece. That's our cyclists and pedestrians and micromobility users. The accessibility piece, the inclusion piece. Number 3 is our safe schools. As you're aware, we've had a number of reports over the last year. So one of the big things around the safe schools will be the active school travel program. Again, that's going to be very capital intensive, and council did approve a motion to include part of to get it going next year in next year's budget. So that'll be a big piece going forward. And then our last piece, we still continue to struggle on the data management front. I will fully admit we are behind the times in terms of our technology. We do everything with a spreadsheet. So, and as part of this plan, we are moving forward with a very common road safety software package that analyzes all our stats, which will help us provide a more inclusive picture of what is happening on our roadways. So we are into the KPIs. Oh, I think I went one too far, didn't I? Yep. Itchy trigger finger. So there are a number, and thanks Councillor Cleary, because he brought this up a couple meetings ago. We expanded the way we're looking at this, and we've developed a number of KPIs. And again, a lot of the conversation that we're having about deferral is just about the per capita number. And a lot of these KPIs, you will notice, number of fatalities and serious injuries, a trackable KPI, is an absolute trackable number. So absolute is within this. Our intent is to take these KPIs, we're turning it into a very nice data dashboard that will be available for council, will be available for the public. It will provide a vast expansion of how we show our data, looking at collisions by mode and jurisdiction and street type. And so it is a very, very large expansion in how we track, and I think a great way of making us a little bit more accountable, a little bit more open about what is happening on our roads. So here's a number of other KPIs. I'm sorry, I'm not reading them, but you can digest them as you like. And this is just our road safety improvements budget, and we show this every time because it's just to remember that we have increased our investment quite a bit, and I will reiterate again right now that as we move forward, we're looking at more significant capital commitments for larger projects, for a data-driven approach. And what that looks like for council is going to be up for council. Typically, I think we spend about $3.5 million on our traffic calming program. $3 million on our traffic calming program. That's why I bring them. And the rest we spend on, upgrading our crosswalks to RFBs, all the other, sort of soft safety features we put into the roadway. In the last year, give or take, we've done 3 protected turning movement intersections at Joseph Howe and Exit 0, at Lacewood Dunbrack, at Portland Eisner. So all these things that comes out of that. So to continue the program like it is, we are either going to require more money or we'll have to rethink how the allocated funding is spent. And I think that is it for our presentation.
Thank you for that presentation. I just wanted to double check on people for time. We did start late today. We are at 3 o'clock. Just getting, if I can get some nods, if we're good to continue to extend the meeting today. Do I need a motion? I do need a motion, please. Thank you, Councillor Purdy, seconded by Councillor Cleary. So we're going to extend this meeting. Thank you to staff for being here. So I'm just going to take a look at the board. Thank you for the presentation, Councillor Mason. And Simon, if you can please provide 5 minutes for each of the speakers here that are on the board. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I'll put the motion on the floor that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Regional Council 1 adopt the Road Safety Strategy 2024, included in Attachment 1 of the staff report dated March 14th, 2024, and endorse the
Councillor, we already have the motion on the floor. Councillor Cuddle.
Simon thought that it hadn't been put on the floor yet? Moved and seconded?
Councillor Cuddle put it on the floor.
Okay, all right. If it's on the floor, that's great. I thought we'd gone straight to deferral. I think this is really good work. I'm just going to say that and own that. I appreciate the approach. I really like the new KPIs. I feel like this gives us a much clearer and more holistic approach. And I feel like we're having this discussion. It's about like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It's like we're arguing about one metric and not looking at all the other potential gains that happen in the work. And the key takeaway I had is you're coming with, this is how much it's going to cost. Okay, council, you've been saying you want these 10 intersections, but we've never budgeted to do it. And now we need to actually have that information. And I think that's exciting because we need to actually commit to spending the money. And that may require us to take money from other places or find other ways to fund it. That's fine, we'll get there. But I say a lot, like I want things to change faster, and I think this will change faster. But as Matt said when he spoke during public engagement, it took 70 years. I think that's quite generous. That shows our age, Matt, because it's actually took 100 years, right? It took 70 years when we were in grade school to get to the point that we have this horrible car-based transportation system. It won't get fixed in a year or two. It won't even be fixed in a decade. But I think we can fix it. We can make substantial gains now. I also note that the originators in Sweden of Vision Zero they still have the goal of getting to zero, but they've stopped making gains because you get to a certain point where human mistakes and errors kind of overcome all the engineering you can spend in the world. They keep trying, but it's sticking around 20% of where it was when they started. So my only real question for you, if we're going to defer this, is, we've been getting these letters from people who have their concerns, and many of them, my read is they're on the external stakeholder committee. And I'm wondering, how many of these letters that we got are from people who had access before we did it sounds like, to the draft of this? Like, when did they get it? How long did they have to respond? Because I'm okay with giving it back to them again, but I feel like if they had a month or 2 weeks, I'm sad they didn't respond and that we're getting these letters. Like, I'd like to know that. I'm willing to defer it to them to commit, but if we're going to have an external stakeholder committee, they have to actually engage with that work. So that's my concern, is to kind of dig into what happened. How did we get here where people who had the report are sending us letters instead of commenting to you about the draft? That may be a little too editorial for you, Lucas, but do the best you can.
Sorry, through the chair to the counselor, I just had to get the dates right. So we did not circulate a draft because it is not, in my opinion, practice to show, a guiding document like this to the public before I would show it to council. I prefer that council has comments on it before the public sees it and then talks to everybody, and then council's like, what the? So what we sent them was our vision, our goals, the priority areas, and an outline for review as part of the stakeholder meetings. You are correct that we invited a lot of people to the stakeholder meeting. 5 people have accepted. 4 of those people wrote letters in. I spent some time before I came to council today, and I reviewed the comments that were submitted as part of the discussion around this document. And I would say, one member had a lot to say, and then it dwindled as we went through the members until there was 2 members that didn't have anything to say. So looking at the feedback, I would say 95% of the sticking point is the per capita number. A lot of the other comments are around reducing speed in our streets. Council is well aware of our issues around that. It's FODAR radar. Council is well aware of the issues around that. A lot of comments, again, of redirecting the traffic calming budget into more structural aspects, but council is aware about that. So reviewing the feedback that we received, I don't see anything that is outstanding. We did our best to incorporate the comments. There are more feedback around, we should have an educational component, which we did, and council made the decision to do what it did. And we've, even as staff, this year we took $25,000 out of our consulting budget to put it into our education budget, because we do want to provide a little bit more outreach in that regard. So yeah, that's, I think, a summary of where we're at.
Great, thank you. That's good context.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleary, and again, if we could just get everyone back on for 5 minutes, or well, actually, Councillor Cleary back on for 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Like Councillor Mason, I do love the KPIs. Shouldn't be surprised. I do also love the vision. Of course, we adopted that when we called it Towards Zero, and we're finally saying, no, it's Vision Zero. We're a Vision Zero city now. I also, especially the top 10 worst intersections, 2, I think maybe even 3 of them are actually in District 9, so I'm pretty happy that that's coming forward next month, because there's some serious issues at some of our intersections that we need to deal with. And the education piece, I'm the one who spearheaded the cutting of that because it sucked. It really did. We were doing an awful job, and everyone recognized that the Heads Up campaign was silly, and we were putting, it's kind of funny when you think about, be visible, wear reflective gear. It's very rare that you would say to anybody, hey, by the way, when you go out today, it's your own responsibility to stay away from getting killed. As opposed to, hey, we should force the other people who are driving tons of metal and steel and plastic around, doing the violence on people, that it's their job to actually be safe. And so I think I said at the time, if we come up with a better idea, then bring it forward and we'll fund that. And so if we have a better idea, let's do that. But the Heads Up campaign was just silly. The goal that people have talked about not being appropriate, I don't think they fully understand, because they didn't read the overarching goal was to get to 0. That's an absolute number. You can't get to 0 unless you're absolutely getting lower and lower. And to Councillor Mason's point, if you look at the last European report from their Transportation Safety Agency and from Sweden itself, they got stuck in 2015, 2016. In fact, collisions went up again, or fatal and injury collisions went up again. And it took them, the concept was born, actually we're the 30th anniversary of Vision Zero being born as a concept this year, and Sweden adopted, I think it was 3 years after that. So we're almost 30 years them trying it, and they've halved their fatal and injury collisions. Now, they were pretty low to start with, but they've halved it. And the rest of Europe is nowhere near where Sweden was, according to the European Transportation Safety Agency. And it's been, our intrepid reporter up there talked about the underreporting. Yes, in fact, my own collision with a car on my bicycle going up Robie Street 20 years ago now, I never reported that to police. I got hit in the ass by someone's mirror going up Robie, turning onto Williams, went butt over tea kettle. And it's hilarious too, the woman who stopped in the car traveling the opposite direction said, "Did you get the license plate?" It's like, yeah, while I was flipped up in the air, that's what I was doing. And so, no, we didn't report it. But we know sexual assault is underreported. We know violent crimes of all kinds are underreported. By its very nature, you can't actually measure that because it's not reported to anyone. You can only estimate what it might be. And I think what we need to do is start looking at ways to estimate. And we did it Jubilee and Oxford Street. We actually asked the crossing guard, the people who were there, about their near collisions or near misses, such as an awkward phrase, experiences. And that is what forced you guys to put the no right turn restriction on, which will be fixed when we get the new land and cabinet and do all the great things to that intersection there. So we're making progress. And so I'm loath to, I'm fine to defer it and get more input, but I think the plan is actually a really great plan. But I would be willing to amend the goal, but leaving in what's there now on the per capita basis, because I agree with you, we can't compare ourselves to what we were in the past. We've added over 100, or almost 100,000 people since I've been a councillor, 60,000 of those just in the last 4 years. And we're a different size place. And then you can't say, well, how do we compare to Toronto? How do we compare to Ottawa? How do we compare to Oakville? How do we compare to Vancouver? We're different size cities. The only way you can do it is to do it on a per capita basis. And I think any other city that's adopted Vision Zero, we should be looking at what they're doing, what we're doing, and making apples to apples comparisons, as well as looking at our own experience. But I'd be happy to tack onto that. And maintain a downward trajectory in total fatal and injury collisions until we realize our vision. I know other people are on the board. I hope we don't defer just yet, because I think other people want to speak to this. And I'm happy to defer it if people want to. But I just wanted to say, I think this is a great plan. The goal is clear, although if we want to make it more clear, talk about how we absolutely get to zero, I'm in favor of that as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Purdy.
Oh, I think staff.
I'm so sorry. Trying to rush everyone through this. Go ahead. Thanks,
I'll
Lucas.
be very quick, sorry, through the chair to the councillor. Just two things I sort of wanted to say is that on the underreported injury report, it's important to remember that Vision Zero is actually serious injury in fatalities. It's not injury in fatalities. And so I don't doubt that it's underreported. I don't doubt that some people get hit, have a fairly serious concussion, but don't realize it, go home, have symptoms, and end up in the hospital. I don't doubt that's happening at all. How much that is impacting the overall program and the overall stats, I'm not sure that impact is that big, because again, it is serious injury, it's not injury. The second piece, I said it during the presentation, I'm fine, and I think staff is fine with any sort of amendment. We're not tied to the per capita. We're going to translate it to the per capita anyways. So it really is not something we're tied to. We stuck with it because I think not even 3 months ago, we discussed it at council, and we did seem like we were moving forward with per capita, so I'm in support of any sort of motion.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. My apologies. Over to Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this. I wanted to ask questions about the per capita metric. So Sweden, this comes from Sweden, as we heard from Councillor Cleary. How do they measure their metrics? Like, what do they use a per capita metrics? And we're going to start doing a 3-year rolling average. I was just noticing, I mean, I'm not a good researcher at all, but just Transport Canada uses their metrics per 100,000 licensed drivers per province and territory. So so they do it per 100,000, but not just residents, but licensed drivers, I guess, to keep it maybe more relevant of drivers, how many of those drivers are getting into a serious and fatal accident or collision. So that was just something I was curious about, because when Norm Collins had presented and first made me aware of this back in the fall, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But then, others have explained it to me the way that HRM is proposing to present it. I was like, well, that makes sense too. So I'm just wondering, how do other jurisdictions who have this Vision Zero programming, how do they measure their fatal serious injury and fatalities? Because if we're going to be comparing apples to apples, like what Councillor Clary said, we should probably use the same metrics as other jurisdictions use. And also, I like how you are proposing to go about targeting the top 10, again, not good terminology, but the 10 most serious intersections that we have, and bringing a capital request to go about doing that. That's real, hard, solid, something to sink your teeth into, as opposed to just high level, arbitrary things. So I think that's good. Okay, so I guess I'll just leave it there for now. Yeah, curious about the metrics and how do other people do it, and
through the chair to the councillor. So my colleague might correct me, but we of course, in preparation of this, we looked at every jurisdiction in Canada and some in the states that we could have. Of the 8 jurisdictions we looked at in Canada, 6 of them report on a per capita basis. 2 of them report in absolute numbers. To your point about Transport Canada, again, it's per capita because it allows you to say Ontario is doing a better job than Alberta, right? What is Ontario doing that Alberta is not doing? And so when we look at per capita, and we include it every year in the annual report to compare ourselves against other communities, and it's important to remember, I believe we are still on we are the lowest or very close to being, I can't remember the latest one, but, so we are doing quite well in the comparison, but in a situation where, you know, Vancouver saw a 50% drop and we looked at it on a per capita basis, we would say, okay, what is Vancouver doing all of a sudden that it's really working, right? So the per capita piece is a really important piece. And like I said, we will translate it to per capita anyways, because we're going to use that number in a lot of instances as we move forward in our reporting. But again, you know, if council wants to add the absolute number, it's fine.
Thank you.
Are you good, Counselor? I'm good. You're good, excellent. Counselor Cottle, over to you for a second time.
Thank you. Yeah, so, you know, I think the end of the story there is that we will have both numbers. It's not like we won't know the absolute number and the per capita number. We need both. You need the absolute number to figure out what the per capita number is. So, okay, I think we're good there. But, okay, my questions, just a couple quick questions, and then I want to make a motion to defer. I don't know how to ask questions and defer when I only have 3 minutes.
You would have to ask your questions and then defer at the end.
Okay, but then we'll go on to the deferral. Okay. Yeah, so education, you know, while we don't have the Heads Up Halifax program anymore, and we're looking at starting up a new education program, I do think this is key, not just from the pedestrian side, but from the driver's side as well. You know, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, like, you know, you mentioned external stakeholders. You know, we're going to have to involve schools. We're going to have to have the police. We're going to have to, you know, look at working with the province. Like even look at my own daughter right now is doing driver training. And, you know, so I asked her, like, what are you learning about pedestrians and how do you, you know, mitigate issues with, you know, cyclists? And, you know, she's still reading the manual and learning, but I feel like more could be done there. So even looking at kind of, you know, getting into that private sector of driver training schools and what's being taught and what the mandatory kind of education program is there. You know, I think that's all a critical piece to this, and I was hoping you could speak a little bit to that, but I'm going to say hold on. And the other piece was about the land use planning, and in particular, you know, when I read that, the street network design I feel is key, and I don't know where the street network design fits in with the planning. We talk about complete communities, but I look at a place like Governor's Brook, and the street network design is so dangerous for pedestrians and pedestrian crossings that I don't know how those two things fit together. So I don't know if you have any early ideas about that. I realize a lot of this is work to come. So with those two questions on the table, I will now make a motion to defer.
Well, do you want to get the answers to your question, Counselor?
Well, then I'll be out of time, and will you let me come back?
She's a very generous.
So let's get the answers to your question, Counselor.
The clerk is like giving me a...
Go ahead. Go ahead, Lucas. Thank you.
Through the chair to the counselor. You know, on the education piece, you know, a lot of communities in our research, you know, have a dedicated road safety public affairs officer, public education staff member. You know, you look through a lot of the different road safety plans. Education is a key component. They have toolkits for young drivers. They have toolkits for schools. They have toolkits for pretty much everything. They go out to schools. They go out to public events. They're at, you know, the, what's it called? I was just there. What's the big, at the Halifax Exhibition, Saltscapes. I was just there, Saltscapes. You know, they'll have the booth at Saltscapes and all those things. You know, we have a very small team. We don't have that capacity right now. You know, we talk lots about staffing resources and things like that, and I do think something like that would be a good investment. I think something like that could be, you know, again, help with an overall public education campaign that is maybe a little bit more relevant and Councillor Cleary's liking. You know, so I think there's a lot of opportunities on the education front where we aren't accessing it into the external stakeholder committee comments. Again, that was one big part of their conversation, is that we dropped the public education piece and we're not doing very much. On the land use planning, I don't know that neighborhood, and I honestly, I can't answer the question. I don't know if Roddy can chime. Roddy can chime in, so.
Go Roddy.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Councillor, I'm Roddy McIntyre. I'm Manager Traffic Services and Road Safety.
As far as the land use planning goes, I'm not going to propose to hold myself out as a planner. I'm certainly not. But I work very close with our development department. When new developments are coming in, even during concept stage, we get to see the proposed road layouts and the road networks, and we always do have comments that go back regarding how the network is done, how they're laying out the roads, how they're designing the roads. As of late, a lot of the developers are actually coming in with smaller scale type roadways. With the past Red Book update, we have the ability for tighter curve radius. We allow lower design speeds. And we've actually got a few that are coming into the point where I'm working with my colleagues at the province, or the relationships I have there, to apply for and get approval for 40 kilometer per hour speed limits to be posted in those developments as soon as they're opened, because they've been purpose designed for lower speeds.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thank you.
Okay, so we're good? Counselor, are you going to put a deferral on the floor?
So with that, I am going to put the motion on the floor that the motion be deferred to a future meeting of Transportation Standing Committee for review by Active Transportation Advisory Committee and key stakeholder groups.
That has been seconded by Councillor Purdy. Councillor Cuddle, did you have anything else on that? I mean, you've spoken to it already.
Yeah, I've spoken to it already, and I just that I do, I'll just say that it's great that you engage the stakeholder groups. It's unfortunate we didn't have more participation, but I think a key part of this is having the opportunity for our stakeholder groups who we do engage with on a regular basis, giving them the courtesy of the time to be able to read this and provide some fair comment and kind of digest what's in there and then come back. My only question to staff would be, is there any urgency around this? By delaying approval, does that affect anything on your end?
Through the chair to the councillor. I mean, I would say I guess not. I mean, we have the top 10 intersection report coming, and I don't know if you want to delay that until you approve this, or because that is part of this. So that would probably be my only comment. And I'll just reiterate my earlier comment that we work really closely with active transportation, but this is not intended to be an active transportation report. It is engineering infrastructure. 70 or almost 80% of our accidents are vehicle on vehicle. So if we're going to get to Vision Zero, that's the piece we really need to address.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. We're going to move on to Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. I just, I would like to see the wording of the motion if that's possible. The last slide of the presentation is still on there. And the only reason is, and maybe Councillor Cuddle can come back to speak to the intent and the process, because when I think about, if we send this to ATAC, which I'm not sure if there's any benefit to that, given what this is, and also what kind of engagement we're expected to have with stakeholders that already were engaged and have been engaged since the beginning. Are we talking about separate meetings, just sending in more input, coming to the next meeting and presenting? I'm not sure. And so I want that top 10 intersection report with us in May, and I want that dealt with, and I want to start on that. And so I appreciate that we want to get more input into this if folks truly didn't have an opportunity, but I think if their main concern was around the goal, we can deal with that and add some absolute language into the goal, but I'm not sure. I can't imagine we're going to change the principles. We're not changing the vision. And the tactics will come back to us in that list of pieces, beginning with the top 10 worst intersections. So I'm not sure what will change based on ATAC review and for review by key stakeholders. I'm not sure what we mean by a for review. Just simply now that it's public, they send in stuff to us, or?
Okay, so thank you, Councillor. The clerk has put that up on the screen. Okay, that the motion be deferred to a future meeting of Transportation Standing Committee for review by key stakeholder groups and Active Transportation Advisory Committee. That motion was seconded by Councillor Purdy. Councillor Mason.
Okay, sorry, I'm also distracted by stuff flying around. I guess the question here is, are we going to leave Active Transportation or the Active Transportation Advisory Committee in there because of what we just heard? I'm okay with delaying it. The main thing I wanted to say just came back to me is the 10 worst intersections is enabled by a motion that's already, like a report that's already been accepted by council. So even if we delay this, you're already under prior request of council to bring that forward. So I would bring that forward regardless. I wouldn't want to slow that down. I think that's the meat in the sandwich, so I wouldn't want to slow that down either. If you told me it had to be slowed down, I wouldn't vote for the deferral. So, but yeah, I'm not sure this needs to go to Active Transportation Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cuttle.
Thanks. I did note while going through the report, I mean, there is a lot in there about pedestrians, pedestrian crossings, traffic calming, things that certainly the Active Transportation Advisory Committee is concerned about and speaks regularly on. So that is why I think it's kind of fair and proper to provide them the opportunity to have a look. I think there is a perception of not engaging with our stakeholder groups, and when we do set up committees, I think it's fair to include them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, committee members. There are no other names on the board, so I'll call for the question. This is on the deferral with the motion on the floor as is, that it has not been amended. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion has carried. Sorry, I was looking at Councillor Morris and I realized you're not on the committee. I'm so sorry. Okay, so that motion has passed. So that is going to be deferred to a future meeting. Thank you. There is a question from Councillor Cleary on process.
So looking to our staff now, so if this goes to ATAC for review, because it's not, the next meeting will get the top 10. This won't come back to us then until a June meeting, because unless ATAC, when's ATAC's meeting? Okay, so is that, you guys can make that happen?
To the counselor, I would hope so. I don't know what's going to happen at ATAC, so there could be 1,000 comments to address, and we may need to prep another document because it has been to another committee, and we will need to respond to that, through from a staff level. So
yeah, okay. Thank you.
And I think certainly agenda setting will also discuss that and just watch this as it's going through to see if there are any issues. So we'll be watching that. So committee members, it is now 3:30. Moving on to motions, there are none. In camera, I have, So can I just go to notices of motion? Colleagues, can we just do that? Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, Councillor Mason has moved to go in camera. Is there a seconder? Oh, you're going to do it in public. Go ahead.
I move Transportation Standing Committee adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential report dated April 11, 2024, and direct the private and confidential report dated April 11, 2024 be maintained private and confidential.
Seconded by Councillor Cuttle. There is no debate on that, so all those in favor? All opposed? That motion has carried. Thank you so much. There are no added items. Date of our next meeting is set as May 23rd. However, we may review that with clerks and change that to May 30th. We will let committee and public know. Call for an adjournment, please. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Thanks, everyone, and apologies for a delayed start today.